Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Welcome back to the Series 5 experiment known as First Age Fridays. It's our chance to visit the history and legends of the eldest of the Elder Days, talking about First Age only. And we are going to continue this series exploring one of the most beloved tales from the First Age. Now, last week, we spent the week in the first part of Canto 2 as we met Morgoth in his halls before moving on to Barahir and his merry men in Nottingham. I'm Dorthonion. And though the faithful dozen made their home there, one of these men would soon be faced with an unthinkable reality. And today we conclude Canto 2 as we learn why Gorlim is called the Unhappy. And it's a longer reading, so buckle up. Gorlim unhappy, Angrim's son, as the tale tells of these, was one, most fierce and hopeless. He to wife, while fair was the fortune of his life, took the fair maiden Eilonel. Dear love they had, ere evil fell. To war he rode, from war returned, to find his fields and homestead burned. His house forsaken, roofless stood, empty amid the leafless wood. And Eilonel, fair Eilonel, was taken whither none could tell, to death or thraldom far away. Black was the shadow of that day, forever on his heart, and doubt still gnawed him as he went about, in wilderness wandering, or at night oft sleepless, thinking that she might, ere evil came, have timely fled into the woods. She was not dead. She lived. She would return again to seek him, and would deem him slain. Therefore, at whiles he left the lair, and secretly alone would peril dare, and come to his old house at night, broken and cold, without fire or light, and naught but grief renewed would gain, watching and waiting there in vain. In vain or worse, for many spies had Morgoth, many lurking eyes, well used to pierce the deepest dark, and Gorlim's coming they would mark, and would report. There came a day when once more Gorlim crept that way, down the deserted weedy lane, at dusk of autumn sad, with rain and cold wind whining. Lo, a light at window fluttering in the night, amazed he saw, and drawing near, between faint hope and sudden fear, he looked within. 'Twas Eilonel. Though changed she was, he knew her well. With grief and hunger she was worn, her tresses tangled, raiment torn. Her gentle eyes with tears were dim, as soft she wept, Gorlim, Gorlim, thou canst not have forsaken me. Then slain, alas, thou slain must be, and I must linger cold, alone, and loveless as a barren stone. One cry he gave, and then the light blew out. And in the wind of night wolves howled, and on his shoulder fell suddenly the griping hands of hell. There Morgoth's servants fast him caught, and he was cruelly bound and brought to Sauron, captain of the host, the lord of werewolf and of ghost, most foul and fell of all who knelt at Morgoth's throne. In might he dwelt on Gaurhoth Isle, but now had ridden with strength abroad by Morgoth bidden to find the rebel Barahir. He sat in dark encampment near, and thither his butchers dragged their prey. There now in anguish Gorlim lay, with bond on neck, on hand and foot. To bitter torment he was put, to break his will and him constrain, to buy with treason end of pain. But not to them would he reveal of Barahir, nor break the seal of faith that on his tongue was laid, until, at last, a pause was made, and one came softly to his stake, a darkling form that stooped and spake to him of Eilonel, his wife. Wouldst thou, he said, forsake thy life, who with few words might win release for her and thee, and go in peace, and dwell together, far from war, friends of the king? What wouldst thou more? And Gorlim, now long worn with pain, yearning to see his wife again, whom well he weened was also caught in Sauron's net, allowed the thought to grow, and faltered in his troth. Then straight, half willing and half loath, they brought him to the seat of stone where Sauron sat. He stood alone before that dark and dreadful face, and Sauron said, Come, mortal base, what do I hear that thou wouldst dare to barter with me? Well, speak fair, what is thy price? And Gorlim, lo, bowed down his head, and with great woe, word on slow word, at last implored that merciless and faithless Lord, that he might free depart, to spare him, to find Elenel the fair, and dwell with her, and cease from war against the king. He craved no more. Then Sauron smiled and said, Thou thrall, the price thou askest is but small for treachery and shame so great. I grant it surely. Well, I wait. Come, speak now swiftly, and speak true. Then Gorlim wavered, and he drew half back. But Sauron's daunting eye there held him, and he dared not lie. As he began, so must he wend, from first false step to faithless end. He all must answer as he could, betray his lord and brotherhood, and cease and fall upon his face. Then Sauron laughed aloud, Thou base, thou cringing worm, stand up and hear me, and now drink the cup that I have sweetly blent for thee. Thou fool, the phantom thou didst see, that I, Sauron, made to snare thy love-sick wits, naught else was there. Cold it is with Sauron's wraiths to wed. Thy Elenel, she is long since dead, dead, food of worms, less low than thou, and yet thy boon I grant thee now. To Elenel thou soon shalt go, and lie in her bed, no more to know of war or manhood. Have thy pay. And Gorlim then they dragged away, and cruelly slew him, and at last in the dank mold his body cast, where Elenel long since had lain, in the burned woods by butchers slain. Thus Gorlim died an evil death, and cursed himself with dying breath. And Barahir at last was caught in Morgoth's snare, for set it not by treason was the ancient grace that guarded long that lonely place. Tarn Iluin, now all laid bare, were secret paths and hidden lair. This was a longer reading, so I don't have a lot of time to discuss it, but all I can say is poor Gorlim. Everybody has a weak spot, and a group of men like Barahir's incredibly brave company is only as safe as the weak spot of the weakest of them. It's hard to criticize Gorlim, but he had to know that Sauron couldn't be trusted. It makes me think a little bit of Hurin. He was tempted by Morgoth himself, right? Tell me where Gondolin is, and I'll give you great power, and you can be one of my lieutenants. In that case, Hurin knew better. Alas, Gorlim was not able to resist, does not seem to have known better. That is it for today's First Stage Friday, but come back next time as Gorlim at least tries to warn Beren of what's coming next. And I don't want us to forget about Fandom Fridays, so if you want to join me on the show when I start that segment back up, please email barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com and let us know. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free RSS feed, a monthly hangout with me, and a whole lot more. And please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up this week with Second Age Saturday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.